How to choose the right media player for your digital signage. When shopping for digital signage, almost all the attention goes to the screen, its size, its resolution, and where it's going to get mounted. But the part that actually determines whether the digital signage runs without issues is actually the media player. You see, we've set up digital signage on pretty much every media player out there across 12,000 different organizations. And after all these years, we know which ones last and which ones need to be replaced in a couple of months. So in this video, we'll break down exactly what to look for in a media player, the best options for every budget, and how to pick the right one for your school the first time around. First, what to look for in a media player. So before you pick a player, you should know what it actually does. The media player is the small computer that loads your content from the cloud and runs it on the screen. So the display just shows whatever the player is sending to it. This is why even the best screen will still give you problems if the player behind it is too cheap to run your content properly. Now, some screens already have a player built in, like smart TVs or the big touch screens that you're going to have in the front of a classroom. But a lot of the times, these can only handle a few basic images and announcements before they start to kind of slow down. If you want to run anything more than that, you should plug in a separate player into the HDMI port of that screen. The first thing to check is whether that player can handle the kind of content that you want to run. If you're just rotating a few announcements or some basic images, almost any player will do. But if you want to run a lot of 4K video and several presentations one after the other, you're going to need a player with enough power, because a cheaper one will lag and freeze the moment the content gets too demanding. The second thing is whether the player keeps running when your internet goes down. Some players will keep a saved or a cached copy of that content on the device itself to continue playing it when it goes offline, while others stream everything live and show nothing as soon as your connection cuts out. And a screen sitting blank or showing a loading animation in a packed hallway or in a busy cafeteria, that makes you look bad. So you want to make sure that you get one that keeps running on its own. The third thing is how easily you can manage and lock these players down once they're spread across all your buildings. If you have them in dozens of rooms across several schools, you want to be able to fix and reboot all of them from a single dashboard, because otherwise someone's going to have to drive out to get to a screen that's often mounted high on a wall. And if that screen is within reach, you want a player that you can physically lock in place, or one that's even built into the display so a student can't just unplug it and connect their own laptop. Now, the last thing is how much a player really costs over the whole lifespan, not just the price on the box. Most media players, they last about 3 to 5 years, and a player built for digital signage will usually last even longer. Yeah, it costs more up front, but it runs all day, every day. So it ends up costing less than a cheaper device that you're replacing regularly. So when you compare players, make sure that you add up the price, the warranty, and how often you'll have to buy a new one. By the way, whatever player you go with, you're still going to need software to manage what shows up on your screens, and that's where Rise Vision comes in. It's our digital signage platform that runs on any of these players. It comes with over 750 ready-made templates, and it connects to tools like Google Calendar and Canva. If you want to try it, I'll put a link where you can book a free demo at the top of this description. Anyways, let's get back to our video. The players to consider. So, with those 4 things in mind, let's start with the commercial players built specifically for digital signage. And these are the best fit if you're running a larger network. Our Rise Vision media player is one of these, and it runs about $95 per media player on a 5-year plan, or $300 to buy them outright. The other one here is BrightSign, and depending on the model, it can run you anywhere from $195 to $1,865. It comes with a free remote management tool, and it's made to run all day, every day, without ever crashing. The downside with BrightSign is it takes a little bit of learning on how to use, and it doesn't do screen sharing. So it's a better fit for a team with IT support rather than a small school that's running everything on their own. Then you've got the mini PCs. These are small, dedicated computers that give you the most power and the most control. And they're the best pick if you've got an IT team that wants to manage everything. The most common one is an Intel NUC running a Celeron processor, and it costs you about $500 for Linux or $550 for Windows. It plays 4K content, and it lasts 5 to 7 years no matter what you play on it. And since it plugs into the same device management software that your IT team is using for all the other computers, you can set it up and control it the same way. The downside is that it's not usually plug and play, and the monitor and the cables are all sold separately. So it takes a bit more setup for your player than just turning it on. And if you ever want to run several screens as one great big display, that's where a professional Windows mini PC is your best option, because it has the power for that. Now, let's move on to the ecosystem devices. These are the Apple and the Google options that make the most sense if your school is already all in on one of those. If you're an Apple school, an Apple TV costs about $129 to $149, and it plugs into whatever system you're already using to manage the Apple devices at the school, and it works fine for basic signage. But it does have its limits. You can't reboot it remotely, it won't play offline, it doesn't support portrait mode, and it doesn't do screen sharing the way that an Android or Windows or Linux player will do. If you're a Google Workspace school, a Chromebook usually runs you around $400, uses Chrome OS, and is all managed from the Google admin console. So you can set up a bunch of them without having to configure each one manually. The one thing to plan for with a Chromebox is that it needs Chrome device management enrollment and a separate license, so there's a bit of extra cost in setup. Now, I will say, if you need something simple and cheap, the Amazon Signage Stick is a great option. It runs around $100, it's specifically built for digital signage, and it supports both portrait and landscape. When it comes to setup, it's about as easy as it gets, and it's the fastest way to turn a screen into a digital sign. And because it's so cheap, it's easy to buy a lot of them when you've got a lot of screens to cover. The only thing to make sure of is that you've got a newer Wi-Fi router, because it runs best on the latest Wi-Fi standard known as Wi-Fi 6E. How to pick the right one. Now that you've seen all the options, the easiest way to choose is to look at 3 things you already know about your own setup. The first is how much content are you going to be running, because simple announcements and a few images will run on almost everything, while 4K and several presentations need much more power to run. The second is how many screens and buildings you're going to be covering, because a few screens in one school is very different than 200 screens spread across several schools. The third is the system your school already runs on, whether it's Apple or Google or Windows, because running the player on what your team already manages will save you a lot of time and problems. So, with those 3 questions answered, you should have a good idea what to pick. For simple content on just a few screens, the Amazon Signage Stick does the job for the least amount of money. And when you're running a lot of video or you're covering a lot of screens over the entire district, better to go with a commercial player like the Rise Vision Media Player, Bright Sign, or a professional Windows or Linux device. And if your school is already Apple or Google, then a Apple TV or a Chromebox work just fine. And if you want to run a lot of 4K content and you want to give your IT team full control to manage and customize it the way that they manage it like every other computer, the Intel NUC is probably what you should be going with. One thing I feel is important to mention is 2 players that I think you should always avoid regardless of what your budget is. The first is any cheap streaming device that wasn't designed with digital signage in mind, because it's not made to run videos all day, you can't lock it down, and you can't manage it across several screens. The second are the older Raspberry Pi models. They're a cheap little computer that a lot of people like to try out first, but the older models, they can't handle high quality video the way that digital signage needs them to. And the one mistake a lot of schools end up making is buying purely based on price. The reason that's a mistake is because the cheapest players are usually the ones that you end up replacing the soonest, and they end up being more expensive in the long run. Or they can't handle the content once you start running more videos and more detailed designs. My point is, across 3 to 5 years and across every building you've got, a solid player you buy once is going to cost you way less than a cheap one that you have to keep on buying over and over. The best way to think about it is match your player to the content you want to play and the network it'll exist in, and let that decide your budget. Now, if you'd rather have someone help you sort all this out with the buildings you already have, you can get a free demo with Rise Vision, which is our all-in-one digital signage platform, by clicking the first link below this video. We'll go through the screens you already own, we'll show you what your signage would look like running on them, and tell you exactly which media player fits each one. That way, you're not paying for more than you need. So again, you can book your free demo with Rise Vision by clicking the first link in the description. And if you want to see how to actually set up your digital signage once you've got the right player, then check out this video next.